Welcome into Basketball by Association. I, as always, am on time with my friend Joel C. Cordes. Joel, Hoopy Hoop Talk time. How are you?
And I am Joel Cordes, always understanding when Arky Shea is on time,
That's right.
as he said. No, I'm glad to talk some hoops. We're going to name the episode quick because we're short on time today. 107 episodes in Arky Shea. We're going to name it after somebody who logged 107 playoff games. And somehow, despite never winning any major NBA award, not a one, this is kind of a callback to Rick Mahorn from last week.
Okay.
This gentleman logged 16 seasons in the NBA and had a couple of years with the Sacramento Kings in the late 80s where he did score either 20 points per game or nearly 20 points per game. I remember him much later on with the Utah Jazz in the NBA Finals. He was one of their key backups. He was clearly long in the tooth at that point. He could still play, but those Utah Jazz teams, they just did not have a deep bench. They were asking too many guys to do too much, and this was a classic one. But he's probably most remembered as one of the forerunners, one of the front runners at the time of NBA goggles. Now, we had seen this with Kareem, of course, back in the day, and a couple other guys in the 70s. But this guy, he didn't have the Rec Spec goggles. Oh, no. He had, like, sunglasses that he got to wear, the much more modern 90s version of the Rec Specs. He played power forward. He's a backup to Karl Malone. If you want to take a guess, you can. But again, it's kind of obscure. You'll know the name when I say it, but probably not much more about him.
Backup to Karl Malone. God, when was...
Came into the league with the Hawks, did 6 seasons there, did 2.5 seasons with the Kings. Those were his most statistically impactful. Did a couple seasons with the Spurs, then 4 with the Jazz, wound up with the Rockets and the Vancouver Grizzlies. He was involved in 2 major trades in his career. He was, at the very end of his career, he was part of the Steve Francis trade that sent Stevie Franchise to the Houston Rockets.
And
he was once traded for Kenny Smith. TNT's Kenny Smith. This is the Antoine Carr episode because we can't spend any more time on this.
Right. I was not even there. I was not even there. I was trying. Yeah, I was trying to think who was the. Oh man, there was a. I don't know. He played for your T-Wolves, I think. I can't.
Are we talking guys with goggles?
Yeah, was that
Bo
Theory,
Outlaw,
Thurl, right?
Thurl Bailey. Yeah,
that was a goggles guy. That's who I was thinking of.
That was and a jazz man too. Yeah,
right. That's kind of where I was like backup, but like 106. So yeah, I was a little off. Yeah.
No, that's a good callback. Thurl Bailey now does color commentary for Utah Jazz broadcast. He's been around that organization for a long time. No, not Thurl Bailey. Antoine Carr. Bo Outlaw was another one, and of course, I haven't seen him with those, but he does have big glasses. And Horace Grant. Those were kind of the goggle men of that era.
Yeah, Horace. Once you got off Horace Grant with me, I was like, all right, well, Horace did play with the Jazz, so now we're sort of gripping for straws here. Yeah, okay. All right, cool. All right. Hey, did Bailey end his career with the T-Wolves, or did he end it with Utah? I can't quite remember.
I think he did multiple stints with the Jazz. Let's check out Basketball Reference here. He did 15 years in the NBA, almost 16.
I was in the ballpark.
Yeah, so Bailey played from 83 to 92 with the Jazz. Then he was traded to Minnesota. He did 3 seasons there. Then played in Greece, played in Italy for a handful of seasons, came back during that 98-99 season with the Utah Jazz. So Thurl Bailey was never actually on the NBA Finals Jazz. He came back the year afterward, the 50-game lockout shortened season. He did 43 games with them.
Stupid Spurs. All right. So, Antoine Carr. All right. This is the Antoine Carr episode. So I'm excited about it. Joel, you talked about that we're sort of short on time, and that's mainly because these 2 series have been, well, they've been better. Like, I've seen better series overall, despite the fact that one's competitive as far as the wins are concerned, the other isn't. Okay, so let's talk about the game that's going to go tonight, okay? Let's talk about the Celtics taking on the Heat yet again for Game 5. This one goes back to Miami. Excuse me. This series has been a little dumb at times, right? It has not made a whole heck of a lot of sense as far as how quickly a couple of these games have gotten out of hand. And even going back to Game 1 when it looked like the Celtics were going to win that game, and then Miami went on a 39-14 third quarter run to run away. And in the first, I think, 2 games of the series, maybe it's 3 games of the series, the Heat had only won like 3 quarters of those 3 entire quarters of the game, and they had a 2-game-to-1 lead, I think, at that point.
Yeah, I saw that stat too. That was crazy.
Yeah, and then in Game 4, you come back. There is no Marcus Smart in that game, but Robert Williams comes back for a time. And from the very beginning, it's all Boston, right? Like, it's all Boston. And, like, I'd like to see a competitive start to the series tonight, to the game tonight, and then hopefully continue. But can I at least get a first quarter out of it?
You'll get the punch, but you don't get the counter punch, right? Like, this is what's crazy about that Game 4. Boston led wire to wire. They dominated, and yet they played not great either when you really get down to it. They shot 39% from the floor, 23.5% from 3. They had only 9 turnovers, but were never in much of a rhythm besides Jason Tatum, really lighting it up in that first half, and that was kind of the story of the game. They hold Miami to 33 points at halftime, and yet Boston for the entire game only scores 102. So that's the kind of box score that you would have seen when Antoine Carr was playing, and that would have been more of an offensive output. But yeah, it was an ugly game. I did a radio spot the other day, and the guy was just kind of trying to, the host was, I won't name names, was trying to show or throw shade on the Western Conference Finals and talking about, there's been too many blowouts. And I was like, well, there's blowouts all the time. You go back to the box scores throughout the playoffs. The blowouts are there. It's the close games that we remember. We also have a quick way of forgetting that in sometimes these classic, amazing series, you're going to get a dud too. And Game 4, even though Boston, again, you got some fun stuff out of Jason Tatum, and the Celtics were playing good defense. It's not just that Miami was missing every shot they took, but they were. But Boston played good defense, and it was competitive in the trenches. But that was a dud of a game, unless you're a Victor Oladipo fan, and it warms your heart that he's clearly showing he can still play after all the injuries.
It does to me, at least,
and
a little bit.
I'm here for that.
Yeah,
I'm here for that.
Yeah. Game 3 was bizarre. Was it game? No, it was Game 4 that was bizarre, where Boston had 400 turnovers in that game, and it's like, wow.
That might have been 3 because they only had 9 in Game 4.
Okay. You're right. Game 4. Okay, we're on Game 4. Right. Okay. So Game 3, the first game back in Boston, right? Okay, the first game back in Boston was a franchise record for turnovers in a game, in a playoff game, and it's just terrible. And Boston's still in that game at the very end, right? They still somehow, despite being blowed out from the very beginning of that game, had a chance in it, and obviously comes up a little bit short. I want to ask about.
Well, I was just going to say, you want to talk about weird stats real quick. That box score for the Heat in Game 4, in the starting 5, nobody's in double figures.
Yeah.
2 of the guys go scoreless. One of the guy, Kyle Lowry, only had 3 points. So of their 5 starters, Bam Adebayo has 9 points. Jimmy Butler has 6. Lowry had 3. Everybody else goes scoreless. I don't think I've ever seen a box score like that for a starting lineup in all my years of watching it. And I used to be the kid who scoured the box scores during the newspaper days. I lived for that. I don't think I've ever seen that. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's really weird. And you would think it would be a little better because the Heat held out Jimmy Butler for the second half in Game 3. They're okay, look, he's a little beat up. We're killing it in this game. We're all right. Let's hang tight. Cost me my points, rebounds, assists total, by the way. But definitely, let's wait for game 4. And in game 4, like you said, that box score where, like Adebayo is just like the only one that knows how, like which side of the arena the bucket's on. Like it was bizarre to sort of see that. And again, I feel like 20 points as the victory it was in that game wasn't enough based on what I saw. Like the fact that final was still 20 points is like, that felt like a 40-point win. Like I don't know. I don't know, but I'm interested in that game. I'm also interested in sort of trying to figure out what makes sense in this series, because there's not a lot, right? Like there's not a lot that completely makes sense. But I feel like I've stumbled across a couple of things. You tell me what you think, okay?
Okay.
To me, it feels like if Robert Williams is able to give you 20, 25, 28 minutes, that Celtics team is completely different, especially defensively. And that guy is someone who can absolutely get close to erasing a lot of what Bam Adebayo does.
I agree with that. I think Robert Williams, to steal a baseball term, gives the Celtics just a little bit of pop in the bat that they don't necessarily have on the front line. Al Horford is so good and so cerebral, but he's a smooth player. He's a gap filler. He's going to make some tough plays, but Robert Williams' ability to get above the rim, to get some offensive rebounds and keep some plays alive. And like you said, just to be lurking there when Adebayo's doing his thing. And Bam is so skilled as well. He can put the ball on the floor, but he has not gotten good looks in this series. He has not been effective to the point that we probably should be calling out Bam Adebayo. This is an all-star caliber player, and it's time that the Heat need him to step up. But yeah, I absolutely agree. It's too bad for Boston, but maybe a silver lining. They get Robert Williams back. They don't have Marcus Smart. They get Marcus Smart back. It's a game that Robert Williams misses and so forth. They haven't been able to get the whole game together healthy.
It feels like the Celtics are better if you're going to have one or the other with Robert versus Marcus, and that's
lately, because Smart has been
in this series specifically. I think. Listen, I'm not saying Marcus Smart doesn't deserve to be on this team in the NBA. Right. I mean, he's the defensive player of the year for crying out loud, right? And he's their starting point guard, so I get it. And I'm not saying Derek White starting out like the first 7 points of the game means anything like as far as long term.
Sure.
But
he went 4 of 14 in game 4. He cooled off pretty quick.
Right. What I am saying though is if I only get one of the two in this series, I kind of think I'm going with Robert Williams.
I don't disagree with that. And I think Smart's availability in the Brooklyn series in round 1 was critical because of Kyrie and the guards, Patty Mills, that Bruce Brown that the Nets have. We've talked about it a little bit that against Milwaukee and now against Miami, Peyton Pritchard is not overmatched in the backcourt. He can give you valuable things as the primary backup guard. And he did that again in game 4. He was 14 points. He was 5 of 8 from the field, 3 of 6. He was actually the best shooting Celtic of the entire night, percentage-wise. But up front, they need Robert Williams. Miami is so tough inside, even though they're undersized, but they're so active down there. Just to have a guy with long arms who can play above the rim, super, super critical. So, yeah, it's a matter of depth at an area of need that Robert Williams is providing right now.
And the other thing I think for me is that it is clear Miami misses Tyler Herro. Like that is a guy that he's a 6th man of the year. Like this guy means a lot for the offense of the Miami Heat, especially when you get into like a physical defense like Boston is.
Yeah,
you need any kind of offensive production and really sort of ability to get your own shots like Tyler Herro gives you. And without him, this team struggles. This team struggles to be the same Miami Heat team. And, Tyler Herro, I didn't see the list. I think he's still questionable or for tonight, but like he's been like everybody's questionable for the Heat for the most part. They ended up playing. But yeah, the Tyler Herro thing is like, it's a big deal.
He's the wild card. He's the Manu Ginobili, Jamal Crawford, Lou Williams, any of these great 6 men. the wild card aspect where they come in and they're going to run off script a little bit. And that still is by design. That gives the offense a little bit of life. He gets to go against some second stringers, but also against starters. The ball's going to wind up in his hand. It's going to give starters the ability to maybe get easier shots, especially some of the lesser starters. It's going to give them a little bit of a break. And in a game where Jimmy Butler is clearly not 100%, and so is not generating offense, Bam Adebayo is getting locked up by both Al Horford and Robert Williams, like we talked about. There's not a lot of other options on this Heat team to generate offense. You're going to run a bunch of plays and try to get a look for Max Strus, who was 0 of 7 from the field. Try to get some looks for Duncan Robinson, who was 5 of 11, but a lot of that was in cleanup time. And Victor Oladipo was able to take over the role of being the bench guard who tried to create something, but nobody else was hitting. And I don't think Oladipo's back to the point, where Hero is already. To have both of those guys, that's a different luxury, and that's something Miami needs. But I'll go back to a point that you made a couple weeks ago, which I've brought back a few times because I like it so much. Miami really doesn't overpower you. They don't overwhelm you. They do their thing. They execute. They play hard, but they wait for you to make a mistake, and then they take advantage of it. But we see the limits of that with this Miami Heat team when Boston didn't make that many mistakes in game 4. Sure, they did not shoot the ball well. Tatum was 1 of 7 from downtown. Derek White, 1 of 8. Jaylen Brown, 1 of 6. Grant Williams, 1 of 5. Like, it's ugly from 3. But they weren't really making many mistakes.
Right. You made a joke that said in the first half, I think they only had 4 turnovers.
Right.
And he was very praiseworthy. It's like, hey, listen, that's a huge thing for you. You talk about the difference between game 3 and game 4. We had 4 turnovers first half. We clearly were cleaning that up.
So there's not a lot of room for error that Boston's allowing. Then you're dinged up. We know Miami has dealt with injury issues off and on all year, but it does seem like a couple have really piled up here in the last couple games, which does not bode well for Miami. And yet still, like you had said, none of this makes sense. Neither of us should be surprised if in game 5, going back to Miami, the Heat wind up winning by 20 points, on some inspirational night from Bam or Max Strus or somebody, that they just have their night, and Boston is the one who can't hit the broadside of a barn. Miami, it wasn't even that they couldn't hit it. They were facing the wrong way. They didn't even see the barn in game 4.
Right. I wouldn't bet the rest of the series to save my life. I don't think I could.
Probably a good decision.
I'll tell you though, maybe live bet it that whoever scores the first 3 buckets, all right, they're going to win by 100. That as far as I can figure out in this series. Before we move on to the other series, which is the most boring of the 2 series, clearly.
I disagree with that, but anyway.
Okay, well, I'll allow an opinion or two from you in a second. Do you feel like now that we're best of 3 in the East, do you feel a sense which way you start to lean at this point?
I'm leaning Boston. Miami just feels like they're grasping at straws a little bit, like they're a very good team, but Boston's been the better defensive team all year and just has a little bit more firepower than Miami does. I'm not confident in this choice, because Miami has certainly earned their right to have some confidence in them. But yeah, I'm taking the Celtics at this point.
I do think that if Miami could really use a hero game from Jimmy Butler tonight. It's kind of similar to what we saw was a game 1 where
they could use a hero game from Hero too, right?
Right. You can use him on the floor for at this point. They really need a hero game from Jimmy Butler. Because I don't think they're winning. I don't think if Miami gets to the East, they're winning the title anyway. But I do think for them to get through this, which I still think they can, Jimmy Butler's got to come up with one more one. I think you got to get a bunch of minutes from him, and he's the kind of guy that will try to put that team on his shoulder, knowing that they're sort of down to it. He will force things and sort of be the aggressor.
Here's the difference between the Heat and the Celtics. If Boston makes it to the finals, I give them a puncher's chance against Golden State. I give them a shot. If Miami gets it, I think you're looking at a 5-game loss, the way that the Heat lost to the Lakers in the bubble, where they got in. It's like, yeah, congratulations, you won the Eastern Conference. You are not as good as the other team. Yeah. But I don't feel that way about Boston. And I mean, still, you got to win this series one way or the other. But
right, and that's why I think that because of the way these two teams matched up with each other, it was probably. It may have been different if Philadelphia wasn't as banged up, right? And if Joel Embiid wasn't broken completely, and maybe James Harden had not forgotten how to score, that might have been different. But I do think the way these two physically match up, and the fact that Boston just came off a 7-game modern day war fest when it comes to, it's as physical as you're going to get in 2022, right? With Milwaukee, that was the chance for Miami to come in and sort of swoop in and try to get themselves back to the finals. Like you said, they're a really good team. They're just not the best team. Like overall, they're not the team that you would think would be the best team in the NBA this season. To the West, where last night, which is Tuesday night if you're listening, anytime other than Wednesday, that the Golden State Warriors, unable to sweep the Dallas Mavericks, and they will go back to San Francisco, the Bay Area, for Game 5. Joel, it kind of feels in this podcast yeller's eyes that no matter the momentum that Dallas has gotten at points in this series, and even in the, I think going into Game 3 when Golden State came back, Golden State is the team that we thought they were, and they feel like they're about to do this gentleman's sweep that we sort of thought was going to be the case going into it. It's kind of gone according to plan, I would say, except for the fact that Golden State came back and won Game 3. I think Game 4 proved to be the game that sort of made sense for Game 3, as far as where in this series I would have thought Dallas would have gotten the win. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts, because this, again, we're not getting entirely close games with these playoffs, but you seem to not be bored by this series, and I'm interested to hear why.
Yeah, I have enjoyed watching Luka try to work his way through Golden State's defense. We talked about at the beginning of the series how Golden State just has a lot of wings, and Andrew Wiggins is playing the best defense of his career. He's playing the most aggressive offense. I have said this for years, and you know this as a fact. Dating back to his Timberwolves days, people were always like, oh, Andrew Wiggins is a bad defender. I said, no, he's not a bad defender. He's a lazy defender. But there were times in certain games where he would lock guys up and you go, oh my goodness, the amount of talent that he has as a defensive player, it's all there. And then he'd come out and give you 3 weeks of just floating around like the ghost of Tracy McGrady, where he just didn't want to assert his talent to its extent. That has been less and less with Golden State. He still has had the tendency to float into the background and just be happy to be a rich man's Harrison Barnes for these Warriors, which is fine because that's what the Warriors need. But he still was an all-star. And we see just how good he is when he's locked in on either end, and the phenomenal athletic ability to be able to get off the floor, to play smooth, but also to he can be aggressive and get offensive rebounds. We've seen him yam one on Luka. We've seen him get a couple of other big body blow dunks in this series, which
can I just say that
he's done his whole career.
I love hearing Joel Cordes say the word yam.
Yeah.
In
I can say ham too.
No. Yam's good with me. I think your point about Andrew Wiggins is fair. And by the way, you gotta love how that play got reviewed, and how Steve Kerr wanted that play reviewed, because he was like, no. Right. And the fact that Andrew Wiggins appreciated that, he's like, they tried to take that away from me. Coach wasn't gonna let them take that away from me. And it was such a great dunk, right? It was such a cool playoff dunk. This is why you get rid of the dunk contest, because the best dunks are in games.
Yeah.
It's such a cool one. And it's not it's not Michael going over Patrick or something like that, right?
Bolt of inspiration right here. Get rid of the dunk contest and instead just show on the Jumbotron the top 10 dunks, in-game dunks from the last calendar year, including the previous year's playoffs, and just let people vote on them. Would we not all have more fun doing that than watching the dunk contest in person? Or at least give us a 3-year break on the dunk contest, and then you can bring it back when we all get sick of it. I would totally be down for that.
I'd much rather like vote on the dunks that happen in game, and like you can make it like a half hour, 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Like the dunk contest's too long anyway. Like it's ridiculous. But anyway, that's for I guess an off season podcast we can talk about. I think
why are you finding this series boring? I'll get to my thoughts on Dallas here and what they did and what they do going forward in a minute, but I'm just curious about that because I've enjoyed Luka versus the Warriors. I've enjoyed the Warriors finding a way to win, doing their thing. I like watching the Warriors play, and Dallas is not unwatchable. I mean, as we've talked about before, they're not the sexiest, but they've gotten some things going in this series.
No, listen. I think, and I've said this here, the brand of offense that the Mavericks play is extremely difficult to watch.
The 4 out, let Luka drive, kick it. Okay.
Yeah, that for me, even as boxed in as everything can get in the NBA playoffs, as hardier as the defense can get, I have definitely enjoyed the East more than I've enjoyed the West. Even though I've known there have been stretches, right?
Mm-hmm.
There have been stretches, even though the West has had like closer games, mm-hmm. right? Like they've had a couple games I think within single digits. I think the Warriors are magical to watch. They're a lot of fun. Not necessarily last night. Last night was a lot of sort of dribbling the ball. Yeah, there was a lot of dribbling around. I think Steve Kerr even mentioned it. Like there's too much dribbling last night. Like last night was sort of not a microcosm of what that team is. But I think the Warriors are a lot of fun to watch. And I do appreciate Luka and what Luka's doing. I just don't think that these two mesh in a very visually friendly style, right? Sure. Despite the fact the games are competitive, right? And there have been like big giant swings of momentum, like watching Golden State come all the way back, so on and so forth. Like I get that,
which they almost did last night too. That bench unit, when they came in that fourth quarter, they outscored Dallas 39-20 and got it to within 8, I think, within 7 with about 3.5, 4 minutes left. And then Dallas brings the starters back and was able to eke it out. But geez, I mean, Golden State's bench almost made it happen. 7 Warriors in double figures, and you lose by 7. And this goes to where I was going to head with it. Like Dallas wins, and they were up big, and Golden State was struggling offensively. The Mavericks did play good defense, as they've done all year. We've given them credit for that. They are not a pushover on that end. But at the same time, it takes Dallas shooting 47% from downtown, and it felt like 110% from downtown. There was just those.
I thought they were going to miss.
Yeah,
it felt like it.
Nobody could miss, and honestly, like Luka was 3 of 11 from 3. So if you take Luka out of that equation, they shot like 65% from 3, and that's also with Davis Bertans going 1 of 4 from 3. So it took a lot, and that's the first time we've seen them all click in this series. The one bit of danger, if you're Golden State, is this has kind of played the same way that the Suns Mavericks series did, where the Suns had all the momentum and Dallas couldn't, the others could not hit the broadside of a barn, and Luka was having to do too much. And like you had alluded to, then they go back in game 3 and Dallas is able to get one, and Golden State couldn't close out the Mavs in the 4th game. And now all of a sudden then it gets interesting. Now they're going back and forth, and Dallas just hung around. Nobody's ever come back from down 3-0. I'm not saying that Dallas can do it, but I am saying Golden State was a little bit lackadaisical in this closeout game. It's hard to do on an opponent's floor. Dallas did get some momentum and shot the lights out. Golden State found more momentum with their bench. But Warriors, do not mess around with these Mavericks. Even going back to Golden State, now that the pressure is off Dallas and they get to just come out and play freely because there's nothing really on the line except this one game, that's exactly the attitude that the Mavericks had against the Suns. We saw them play differently. We saw the others knock down some shots, and things got real tough to the point that then it got out of control for Phoenix. Don't mess around with them, Golden State. Like, this is not a team I think that you you say, well, we'll just continue to show up and the odds are in our favor to put them to bed. I do like the edge, the pluckiness that Jason Kidd has shown with his guys that has kind of filtered down to them. Luka's got it rolling too. I think game 5 is going to be a fun one. I think Golden State does get the gentleman's sweep, but it's going to take a big time effort in front of their home crowd in order to do it.
2 brief things before we sign off here. I do not undersell the fact that what had happened just a few hours before in Texas and what Steve Kerr had said right before getting his team ready for the game.
Yeah.
Sort of could be impactful for inspiration, right? Sometimes, and it's really hard to explain from just a X's and O's standpoint. Sometimes there's just a momentum one place. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there is just a spirit in one place. Sometimes there is just an energy in one place that allows for one team to be better in a situation that's potentially galvanizing a community or an area that they're in than the other. Also, I do want to add that we've seen Golden State peel away a game or two here and there. Like they're not the team that goes in and just sweeps and shuts down teams all the time. Mm-hmm. Like their style of play and the arrogance and the confidence that they play with, they give you a lackadaisical game every now and then. And it's even in series, especially if they're up 3-0, right? They thought we're going to go back home and like we got 2 out of the next 2 out of the next 2 out of the next 4 are going to be at our point, right? Is that right? 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah.
Well, 2 out of 3 now, yeah.
Well, what would have been? I was just trying to think of the math. Like you would have, like we had 2 more games possibly at our place to sort of sweep this if we need to, or to finish this thing off if we need to. No, 3. Sorry, they would have had 3. No, is that right? It does. I can't even figure out the math at this point. My brain's fried. But anyway, Golden State does this. They have been known to do this where like it's a series that feels like it should be a sweep. It's 5, right? Mm-hmm. Or sometimes it gets stretched to 6, but Golden State's still the better team. And I feel like that's the case here. I feel like there's a little bit of an element of galvanization, a little bit maybe out there in the aura of what was around Dallas, and also the fact that Golden State was up 3-0. Like they do allow other teams to grab one and they go back and they win in front of their home fans, kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Last question for me, and this is totally off topic from the playoffs, but as we wrap things up, maybe it's a segue into free agency in a later time, but I just wanted to pick your brain real quick. We're hearing rumors that Zach LaVine might have eyes for other teams and leave the Bulls. We're hearing rumors that the Brooklyn Nets want absolutely nothing to do with offering Kyrie Irving a long-term extension. Both teams have invested a ton in those 2 players to try to build something, and we've seen some success. I was just going to ask you real quick, this is a total hot take type of thing. Whose potential departure would be more damaging for their respective team? LaVine leaving the Bulls to go elsewhere, or Kyrie Irving basically being shown the door and that being the end of things?
I think it would be Kyrie. I mean, Kyrie's a Hall of Fame player. Like that guy is elite, right? That there is not another Kyrie Irving in the league right now. Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, if Brooklyn sort of shows the door and says, or says, "Hey, listen, we'll do it, but we're doing short-term kind of thing," and then
1-2-year deals,
then I would say Brooklyn would be more damaged, because then you just go back to, this whole team was built around 2 dudes, and then added a third, and then all of a sudden, all of the capital you spent to sort of get to the 2 plus a third, and then try to contend this year, you're down to 1 guy, and as great as Kevin Durant is,
so many draft picks gone.
It's hard. It's going to be a hard for Brooklyn. I think Chicago's in a space that if they lose Zach LaVine, they've continued to build, and I don't think they would fall as far as Brooklyn would, as far as what their overall win record would be with no other considerations made.
Well, I'm going to take the other tack, but due to time, I won't have time to explain it, so we'll just leave it on a cliffhanger. I think LaVine leaving the Bulls would actually be the bigger deal. And we probably will talk about it next week when we come back. But, we'll probably be previewing the NBA Finals already at that point, which is kind of exciting too.
That's right. We'll be talking about the Mavericks taking on the Knicks because they jumped back into it. I don't know if you saw that, but they were granted a commissioner's exemption over the weekend. So, Joe,
cocaine's a hell of a drug, Arky Shea.
Are you accusing or recalling memories?
Both.
Okay. All right, my man. All right, that's going to do it for the Edge One Car episode. Mr. Joel C. Cordes. Joel, tell people where they can find us on the visual form.
That is on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, all that good stuff. If you want the audio-only version, Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. This has been Basketball by Association. We will see you next week.